Welcome to another episode of Living with Purpose. This time I have two guests, Malini and Sanjay, with me, and we're going to listen to their journey and how they have got to where they have got to, and also talk a little bit about how purpose is driving them. So I'm going to start off with Sanjay. Sanjay is an accomplished entrepreneur, technology leader, and now a owner of a sports team. So Sanjay, talk a little bit about your journey growing up in India as a cricketer. You played almost semi-professional cricket, and then from there to Microsoft to launching other companies and now owning the Seattle Orcas.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Hi Hector. Good to see you. Yeah, my journey started in Chennai or Madras in the southern part of India. And yeah, I grew up playing cricket pretty much all the time. And, through school, through college, played in a professional league, the first division in Chennai, as well as, for school and of course, for the state and what's called the South Zone.
Yeah.
South Zone is the level just below playing for India. Now, a lot of my friends and teammates have ended up playing for India. I am a little older than I look, so it was a long time ago. But some of my teammates are now coaches in the IPL too. So I mean, they've carried through with their passion. So while cricket really was kind of the foundation of my formative part of my life, I also had a decent set of chops when it came to academics. I was, I think, the only person on tour with my math and chemistry and physics textbooks. And I'm glad I did that because, it got me into MIT, which was another world.
Right.
And at 21, I landed up in the U.S., Cambridge, Mass. And that was a really interesting experience because I think it was for the first time I realized the power of the idea. I mean, in those days, artificial intelligence was a thing at MIT.
Right.
Marvin Minsky and how regimented our education is in India, and I just got through it. Playing cricket all the time, but just getting through kind of my engineering and my school. But MIT kind of opened my eyes to the thought process, new ideas, and it just blew me away. And I still tell people, my kids especially, that my master's in engineering at MIT was 2 years. I did one course per year and spent the 2 years writing my thesis. Right, and it was just you could explore anything and everything that you wanted. And I dabbled in AI, dabbled in logic, and then mechanical engineering, which was supposed to be my degree, was kind of the minimalist part of my thesis. But also MIT encouraged us to build things. So when I went and got my MBA at MIT Sloan, I ended up working for a professor in marketing, and we built a system to test whether people would buy cars without ever talking to a salesperson, right? And this was before the internet.
Right.
And it was during that time I met Malini, but that's a completely different story. But
Selling a car?
building this system, but it also is what got me into Microsoft. I mean, I remember. Microsoft came to Sloan to interview for to hire people, and of course I didn't get invited because I didn't have any work experience. I went straight through from undergrad to graduate to MBA. But I got talking with a couple of the recruiters after they'd finished the interview process, and they asked me what I was doing. I said I was building this prototype. I said, can we see it? So I took them to the lab and showed them what we were building, and they said, you should come to Microsoft and interview, which I did, which is what landed me at Microsoft in 1990. So I moved in 1990, and ended up spending 20 years at Microsoft. Started in Windows, went off to run Microsoft in India, came back and run Microsoft.com, .NET, and then kind of the startup itch got to me. We moved the family to India, back to India, the kids, to give them a little experience of what it was like growing up. Started this AI company, 10 years too early. Better to be early than ever.
Right.
And then sold it about, almost 5 years ago now. And then that company got sold, which is when the cricket opportunity came up. And so the Seattle Orcas started in 2023, and I spent the last couple of years running the operational side of the team. And we hired a full-time CEO this year, so I'm now looking for the next journey, next part of the journey, the next adventure. So that's a little bit of the history.
So one of the things that you spoke when you spoke in my class, which kind of just resonated, is why we should be not treating in the commercial world people as clients or consumers, but really treating people as fans.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, because that really stuck with me. And you obviously coming from the sports world, you actually see things in a very different way.
Yeah, actually the journey, I would say, started at Microsoft. My first job was, as product manager, but really was evangelizing the product, which was adding audio and video to the PC, with software companies that were doing educational or game software. And the way to connect, with software developers, evangelize, as we used to say, was to talk about how it would change people's lives, how it would potentially add joy to people's lives. And the whole concept, the story that I would tell about audio and video was an emotional engagement with people who are using the computers, not just to do productivity, not just to get stuff done. Now fast forward all the way up to the cricket team, and the thing that struck me in the last couple of years is how deeply involved fans are with the sports team. It doesn't actually matter whether the sports team wins or loses.
Correct.
Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. That's sport. But the fans are deeply engaged with the sports team. Now, you think back to the early days of the computer, and people would line up, around the block at midnight to get the latest version of Windows or whatever game software it was. They were really connected with the companies that were building that software. So what started off with software for me was just resonated again more recently with the sports teams. And we all know fans want to be part of a tribe. They love a product, and therefore they dedicate themselves to it. They love the values of the company. They dedicate themselves to the company. And so I think we've lost a little bit in the software industry, in the technology industry, of really thinking about our customers as fans and what we would do to engage with them every day. Provide some joy, provide a little break from the tedium of productivity. Right. Yeah. And so thinking about our customers, a customer as a fan, I think is a change in what you would do to engage with them. We don't use the word evangelize necessarily anymore, but it's really about engaging. And you see a lot of that happening in the entertainment business.
Correct.
Right, with influencers.
So one of the things that I kind of talk about, and I'll switch to Malini in just a second, is that we're no longer in the age of creating organizations. We are actually in the age of creating movements. And fans are what actually help you create movement. So when you see some of these new companies that are coming in, they're actually TikTok. TikTok, people are becoming fans of TikTok.
Yeah.
And how they actually interact. So it's this part of you talking about, joy, and how do you bring joy, and anything you do should bring joy. It's not just about happiness, but it's about joy. And I thought that distinction that you were making really resonated with me.
Fair enough, but I will disagree with you on the movements part. I think movements are sometimes not dangerous, but end up becoming for the benefit of the person who's trying to do the movement. Okay, and let's take TikTok as an example.
Right.
The movement has become a business model, right? And it's to extract every little ounce of, energy, of profitability out of that movement. So personally, on reflection, I would say if you turn it around and say what are the fans experiencing, I would love to just say creating moments of joy.
Yeah, no, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, no, this is yeah, and again, hey, all of us learn something in these conversations that we have. And again, this notion of fans and moments of joy, I think, is great. So, Malini, talk a little bit about your journey and then your now current focus on really supporting political activism, particularly from the diaspora community, people that are here, and how that is actually driving you.
Okay, well, well, like Sanjay, I was also born in Chennai, but I moved here to the U.S. To upstate New York when I was 4 with my family. My father was a physician, and they lived in Rochester, New York their whole lives. So that's where I grew up. Then I went to Boston, and I was in this 7-year medical program, so we did undergrad and grad school kind of in a rushed way. I worked all summers and things like that. And that's where I actually met Sanjay. So we were both in Boston at the same time.
Right, and this was all in the 80s, right?
Yeah,
early 80s,
yeah.
Yeah, the same time we were there.
That's right. In fact, we crossed paths. Well, we didn't quite cross paths, but we were in the same airspace at MIT.
Yeah, yes. And Alka was actually, doing stuff at Media Lab, and she was working very closely with the AI stuff at that time. But anyway.
Right. And I was doing a lot of my work at Boston City Hospital, so it was in the city. And then graduated and moved. So he left for Microsoft 2 years before I graduated, so we had a long distance relationship for 2 years. And then I came here to do my residency in internal medicine at Virginia Mason. And since then, my path has not been linear like his has at all. So, I worked for Virginia Mason. I worked for a group called Medallia. Then I took time off to have kids. And then we moved to India for 3 years, and I wasn't able to work in India because my license wasn't recognized. So I did some administration work for a mental health organization there. Came back and then realized I had been out of medicine for so long that nobody wanted to hire me back. And I like to say that getting back into medicine after many years away was actually harder than getting into medical school and going through medical school. Right. Because I had to sort of prove myself. So I had to take my boards and do some volunteer work and then do some disability work, and then finally I got a real job. And I worked for CMAR for about 7 years, and they are a community health, they're community health clinics. So they basically treat the poorest of the poor, people who don't have enough insurance, who are underinsured, and who fall through the cracks, basically. So that was very rewarding work, opened my eyes quite a bit to the state of medicine in the United States, which is horrible. Basically, if you don't have insurance, it's very hard getting into any specialty care or anything like that. And people were going bankrupt. People who started off not having very much money in the first place. But I did that, and then I worked through the pandemic, which was very difficult. And then I kind of got burned out after that. Then after that I went to work for a medical startup, and then did that for a little while, and here I am now. Right now I'm doing telehealth, which is a different thing for me, so I'm trying that out. So.
I mean, CMAR was doing some extraordinary work during COVID,
yes.
right? Talk a little bit about that, just to kind of get our listeners going to get a sense of what community-based healthcare organizations and how they are instrumental, especially reaching into the underserved community
Yeah,
with no
yeah.
access.
Well, they did a lot. I mean, we have our own radio program. For instance, we run we used to run a lot of nursing homes and things like that. And it's basically giving access to people who don't have any. So we would see anybody. I mean, it was a sliding scale. That you could pay, and if you couldn't pay, there were some funds for people who couldn't pay. So we really were able to see everybody, and we were, one of the first ones to have the COVID vaccines for people who are not able to get them. So that was, I think that what they do is really extraordinary. They really reach out to people and get them into the organization. They do a lot of advertising so that people know that they're there, and also we're very aware of the mission. When you work for them, that's sort of stated in our every day. In our signage in our clinics and things like that. So. That's what they do, and it was the most wonderful thing I've ever done, really working for them.
Yeah, one of the things that I was doing during COVID, where we were working on increasing masking first, and then vaccination.
Right.
There was just a lot of anti-masking, anti-vaccine, and from the university and students and a couple of us were actually doing this work, and CMAR was actually, we were working with them very closely, because in many cases, a lot of the people in the Hispanic community, the Black community, the Native American community were all worried about just people trying things on them,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And they didn't have confidence. So getting these community-based organizations to actually provide that confidence level was actually really, so talk a little bit about just how that part also helped you in terms of your thinking.
Well, I mean, I think that I had been raised very middle class. I had trained in an institution that was not, centered around people who had less, people in poverty and anything like that. So going into this organization was very different for me. The focus was extremely different. And so I think that changed me a lot. It allowed me to sort of realize that there's this whole other underworld that we're not aware of.
Yeah.
And, there's so much need in that population. It's really unbelievable. And so, I really I was thinking of starting a program for, people who couldn't afford their medicines, and to help them get their medicines and things like that, but I never really got that off.
Next time.
There's still time.
There's always time.
So talk a little bit about this now, the last few months that you've got, mobilizing the community, and why that is important.
Well, I've always been somewhat political.
Yes.
I mean, I've been doing fundraisers for the candidates for a while, and I have donated a lot. I spend a lot of my extra time doing that. I mean, I do a lot of phone banking, I do a lot of letter writing, I do postcards, I call my senators, I call my congresspeople. I do a lot of the, things that, ordinary, normal people, we would like them to do more of. So I like to make sure that I'm at least doing that, even while I'm advocating for it, for other people to do it. I want to make sure that I'm doing it as well. And I mean, that's, increased to the point where, I was I was really spending almost all my time doing that this last election. But anyway, and then, I've gotten interested in doing bigger fundraisers and things like that. So I think that's, I don't know if I would be a person who would actually run for office, but I've considered it, but I haven't done that. But I have a lot of interest. So, this is just my way of, showing my interest.
Yeah. So let's kind of shift to this whole question of purpose and purpose-driven work. Talk a little bit about how you show up with purpose and then how do you use it in everything that you do?
Well, I mean, a lot of my background is in medicine, and that's basically how I show my
Right.
purpose. So I am always available for people, and I always take calls, no matter who they are, friends, relatives, anywhere in the world, they can call me, and I will research their issue and get back to them. I think my purpose is more of a helper. I like to be of help to people. I'm there for and I've been there mostly for my kids. I mean, that's the reason I took so much time off of medicine. But I think in general, if you have a helper mindset, that is, something that you can maintain for, forever and grow. And that's what I like to do. So.
And how does that help you when the times get tough? Right? And we all kind of go through these tough times, regardless.
Yeah, I don't know. How does that help me? Well, I just feel like if I'm doing something for someone else, then it'll pay back to me later on when I need it. And I've had a lot of help in my life from friends and family. So, I think that just knowing that there are people out there who can help me in my times when I'm not doing so great is very helpful. And I feel like, being there for other people, whether it's, for a medical problem or something else, it's always useful. And, it's the only thing it's one of the only things that I feel like I'm, confident of doing. So.
Sanjay,
purpose is an interesting thing because for me at least, purpose changes over time.
Of course.
Right? I mean, you start with very goal driven, so the first 20 years it was get through college, get into grad school, find a job. It's very kind of goal driven purpose. And I think over time that changes to mission driven, right? And so I remember, at MIT Sloan, I wrote a paper in international class about how India could be a software superpower, right? And this was in 1989. It was a very mission. It was a mission that I was hoping I could, take on at some point. And lo and behold, at Microsoft, that opportunity presented itself. I went off to run Microsoft in India, and Bill Gates visited India in 1997. And the motto of that tour was India can be a software superpower,
right? Yeah.
Right. And so it transitioned from goal to mission, and over time, I think it is transitioning to a more of a meaning driven kind of purpose, right? What does it mean? And one of the ways that I find meaning now is, cricket gave me so much in life. In fact, it really is the kind of way I do things day to day, what I learned in those days. Now giving back to the community, giving back to kids who are playing cricket in the US, giving back to, the national cricket team, that has more meaning. Yeah. So for me, it's not one thing. And at any given point, I can hold three ideas in my head.
Correct.
You can have multiple purposes.
Yes. No, and of course, yeah. I mean, and again, I think that, Malini, just you're kind of talking about this, the way you show up for others, and that kind of gives you your sense of authenticity. Yeah. That I want to help and I want to show up, and that's just a great way of framing how anybody can show up. You with purpose. It's not about making this massive change in the world. It's these small actions that count.
Yeah.
And even, when Sanjay is kind of talking about, yes, he kind of wrote a mission-driven paper which actually led to a massive change for the company and for the nation in some ways.
Yeah.
With Bill Gates and the company and others moving into that space has had a huge impact on millions of people, right? Or hundreds of millions of people. So that's just this massive change. But this initial idea of joy And purpose kind of gets you to that frame where you can have joy.
That's right.
So let's end with both of you kind of giving one golden nugget, your piece of wisdom that you would like to share. I mean, you pick whoever wants to go first.
Well, I mean, I think that is what gives me joy is being able to help. But I guess my nugget would probably be just to be happy with yourself, because I haven't had a straight path to what I'm doing. I've meandered back and forth, and I haven't had that academic career or anything like that I may have initially wanted. But you just have to be happy with the path that you've taken and the things that you've done and the joy you've brought to others. So
that's great. Thank you.
So my nugget is a thought experiment, and this is something that I've used in interviews for Microsoft, in any job that I wanted to hire for. I've always asked the candidate, "What do you stand for?" Right, and I've just left it at that.
Yeah.
And usually there's silence for about a minute or so, and people go, "What do you mean?" And I'm whatever you want it to mean.
Yeah.
And it really is to encourage, people to talk to me about what do they care about, right? What do they stand for? And it could be anything. It could be, a project that they're doing. It could be their value, the value system in their lives. It could be their purpose, right? And so my advice is to think about this often. What do you stand for? And sometimes for me, it translates into writing down the principles of the organization that I want to start, or at the beginning of the year, it's what do I want to accomplish, or what do I want to do at the end of the year. So think hard every time you can, every moment you can, about what you stand for.
Now there are these two great, sets of golden nuggets, right? I mean, one, if you show up with authenticity, you will actually be joyful and be happy. And career is just one way to get that. And the other is stand for something. Stand for something, whatever that may be. So both of you, Malini and Sanjay, thank you very much for being on this podcast. Again, purpose is that renewable source of energy that continues to drive humanity forward. Keep listening to us. Thank you very much. Up until the next episode. Thanks, both of you.
thank you, Upton.